Masters of the Universe Classics fans, the 6-7-inch toy line that Mattel did between 2009 and 2016, and then was taken over by Super 7 for a couple years. This is Scott ToyGuru Neitlich, and I had the esteemed honor of being the brand manager for about 90% of the line, or at least 2007 through 2015, planning 2016, but I didn't work on the Super 7 part of it because I didn't work for Super 7. I worked for Mattel. I had the privilege of working for Mattel and got to work on a dream He-Man line, which of course included Skeletor. And we're doing a video today about one of the first major Skeletor variants in the line, none other than his alternate identity, Keldor. Yes, that handsome devil Keldor with his mustache, goatee, long black hair, rippling muscles. He's just, I don't know, he's very, I don't know, I always think of him as like kind of a Robin Hood character, even though I know he has nothing to do with Robin Hood. Maybe it's that Errol Flynn thing he's got going, or I don't know what, but he's kind of the, he's the Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader, I guess, if you will, if Darth Vader is Skeletor. And I always loved the idea that he was, once a good guy, was once like a noble and good prince of Eternia before he turned to the dark side, or the Hordak side, or his own side, the Skeletor side. So let's talk a little bit about Keldor and his history. So Keldor was an interesting figure. So as I mentioned, he was the very first kind of Skeletor variant, and that being in this kind of the second full year, 2010 is where we are. We're in June 2010. He was not a monthly slot, but he was a day of figure. He was an extra figure because he didn't have that many new parts. He had a new cape, a new head, and a new acid vial, which is what sort of transformed him kind of into Skeletor, but that's a story for another time. The point being is that since he didn't have that many new parts, this was kind of a continuation of the program we started with characters like Goddess and Zodak with a K, where we were going to offer minimally tooled refreshes throughout the year that were not part of the subscription to basically see how many figures we could sell. Was the audience big enough? So Keldor here steps right out of the 2000X series, where he was kind of cast as Randor's arch enemy right from the beginning. The very first scene is the two of them battling it out in the Crystal Power? Well, I forgot what it was called. It wasn't Castle Grayskull. And then eventually, he comes back as Skeletor and faces off on Randor, as well as Randor's Masters of the Universe, and becomes the archenemy of He-Man, but started off as Keldor, the archenemy of Randor. And for as much as Keldor has now kind of become a very key, important part of MOTU lore, he was never seen before the 2000X series. He had been mentioned, and we'll get to that, but he was a character that more or less was fleshed out in the 2000X series and was given his look, was given kind of, again, that very handsome Errol Flynn, piratey, Robin Hood-y look, as well as there was kind of a outcast version of him, or maybe a younger version, which I kind of wish that would have been fun to get to too. We did put that in the mini comics, but it was kind of like the midway point between him being the good guy version of Keldor and the bad guy version of Keldor when he turns to Hordak. And as part of Keldor's history, as far as an action figure history, of course, the very first collector figure that Masters of the Universe did, like aimed at the adult collector, sold at Comic-Con, was Keldor, which was also a Skeletor refresh with a new head, a burning head, the acid vial, and a lot of black wash, if you will, like a very amped up deco. And this was the very first time Mattel did a action figure in the Masters of the Universe line that was specifically aimed at the adult collector. Yes, adult collectors bought the 2000X series, but this figure was sold at Comic-Con and was absolutely aimed at that demographic, as opposed to the kid demographic. So where did Keldor begin? Well, he began here in The Search for Keldor, which was a Bruce Timm, yes, that Bruce Timm, illustrated Masters of the Universe mini-comic that shipped at the tail end of the line. I remember getting mine with Scareglow. I want to say it also shipped with King Randor, and maybe Clamp Champ. Of course, it featured all those characters in it, since that was also the point of the mini-comic, was to push the figures. And what was brought up in this comic was the idea of the secret of Keldor. And what was the secret of Keldor? Randor was looking for his long-lost brother, and who was Keldor. But the idea that this was Skeletor was not revealed in the minicomic. It was just basically a battle against Skeletor, while Randor, swears that he will find his, long-lost brother, Sorceress is helping him, and Clamchamp is helping him, and, He-Man winds up defeating Skeletor by throwing him into the jaws of the main tower in the Towers of Eternia playset, again, pushing the new SKUs, and they basically swear to continue looking for Keldor and maybe figure out what Skeletor's secret is too. Dun, dun, dun. Now, the first time they were revealed to actually that Skeletor was Keldor was in this interview that Ian Richter did on He-Man.org. Previous to this, it had never been confirmed that Skeletor and Keldor were the same. It was, highly hinted at. So with this being established by Ian in this interview, basically brought Masters of the Universe to being Hamlet, right? It's the main hero versus his uncle who disposed the father and married the mother. I mean, not quite Hamlet, but, you get the point. We were able to flesh this out a little bit more in a mini-comic called The Origin of Skeletor, where we finally told the story of Keldor becoming Skeletor and, King Miro, and, we had young Prince Randor there on the cover, and we did a lot of stuff with the visuals, making Keldor, a prince in, royal armor in the beginning, fighting side by side with his brother Randor. Again, this was kind of like the Clone Wars, Anakin, Obi-Wan part of MOTU lore, where you had, the two princes fighting side by side before Keldor sort of, turns to evil. And a part of that was the death of his stepmother, so Randor's mother. Randor and Keldor are half-brothers. Keldor's mother is a Gar, one of the blue-skinned race. And there's obviously some manipulation with Hordak going on there about, how mom dies. And Keldor winds up getting banished, and he meets up with Hordak, who projects himself from Etheria. More on that when we get to, the Hordak spirit figure. But Hordak trains him in the mystic arts, and much like Anakin becoming Darth Vader, Keldor is kind of, becoming Skeletor before the accident. The accident that puts Darth Vader in the suit, or the accident that puts, turns Keldor into Skeletor. And the only way to save his life is combining him with an extra-dimensional being, Demo Man. But again, a story for another time. So the Keldor figure was first revealed at the art show that we did with Gallery 1987. You can see Optic's video for more about that. And we did so right next to Optic. There is a little vial of acid there on the ground. I don't even know if you can see it in this picture. But that was kind of the start of putting out accessories to hint at figures that were coming. And something that got carried on forward into Comic-Con and other conventions, and we used quite a lot during my time at Mattel, because essentially without a comic book or a movie or a TV series, the only thing we had to basically market the brand was figure reveals or, bios or the mini comics. So anytime we could get any kind of reveal and get some publicity, that was a win for the brand. So that's why we did things like, putting the acid vial in that cabinet as a hint that a Keldor figure was coming in the not too distant future. Pretty cool. And I was glad when we did things like that. All right, and as we move up this Keldor figure, kind of stopping midway to take a look at those swords, that's kind of also a last thing to talk about, an important part of him. So he came with both versions of Skeletor's sword, both halves in purple, which is the only time we ever did that. Previously, if you wanted both sides, you had to combine the silver He-Man version with the Skeletor version, or I think Faker had the bad guy version. It was basically the male-female plug. And there was a lot of debate about this and how Classics works. And the way I explained it was Classics was a reinterpretation of the vintage line. So as a good visual example, here is Beastman. Here is the vintage Beastman figure released in 1982. Very simple, used the shared body, in this case the Beastie body. There were 3 bodies originally created, Beastie, Human, and Reptile. Skeletor having the reptile body. And then when we did Classics, we simply updated the vintage figure. So the vintage figure was the starting point, and the new style of Classics was basically increased articulation, 6 inches, more paint, more deco, more details. And that's how a figure from the vintage line became a Classics figure. Likewise, the 2000X line essentially had the same thing. They started with the vintage figure, but then added what I was calling kind of hyper anime detail, where now the figures were bulkier and they had more spikes and they had a lot more heft to them. It was a different interpretation of the same vintage figure. Starting point the same, but different artistic interpretation. So what we probably should have done with Keldor swords is done this, is essentially taken the vintage, the Classics, He-Man sword and painted it, kind of like this and done sort of a half blade. I think this would have been actually a much cooler way of doing the swords, because there was a lot of pushback that we didn't do these swords, that we didn't do exactly the 2000X swords. Eventually we did do them. So this was given out first at PowerCon and later as like a whole one, and then we later did a splitting version. I'll get into that when we do the video of this. But the point being is, this is, I think, what fans wanted from the get-go, and the reason we didn't go in this direction is because Skeletor was supposed to have, the main sword, but fans kind of wanted him to have his own sword, which was this one, and I mean, this wasn't something worth, fighting fans on. I mean, we always wanted to give fans what they wanted. It just took a while before we had a slot where we could release this. Like I said, maybe releasing the classic sword in the purple and the orange, like metallic colors might have been a cool way to go about it. In the end, we did produce this sword, and you could give it to Keldor as a combined sword or as a splitting sword, and hey, everybody wins, right? The whole idea is, in time, we get to everything. So we also didn't get to this because we didn't have tooling. We used up our tooling on his head and his cape, and we just had a little left over for the vial. So he was supposed to be a low tool figure, as he wasn't in the monthly slot. So that was the other reason that he didn't come with this sword right off the bat, is we had to basically use existing tooling. He was not, the monthly figures got more tooling to them, and these kind of quarterly refreshes, he was meant to be a refresh of Skeletor, essentially, with a new head, and we got to throw in that cape, which was awesome, because, again, you could take that cape, and you could actually give it to Skeletor, and, mix and match. And that was what Classics was all about. It was, building the line as we go and getting more and more stuff until you got the definitive version you wanted. And if you wanted that sword, hey, in time we got to it. And that's what the line was all about. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we did Keldor. He's awesome.